I ask consent the call quorum be terminated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, first of all, I appreciate your patience in presiding over the Senate this late hour. And I want to extend my appreciation to this staff, everybody here assembled, for all their work these about the last month has been very, very difficult. And I appreciate very, very much the professionalism that's shown here in the Senate and the efforts they go to make all of us look good. And sometimes that takes a lot of effort. But I do appreciate they're working so hard together. This here at the desk here, this is if there's ever anything that's bipartisan, it's right here. Republicans, Democrats, and here there is no partisanship on the Senate floor. Step back a little bit, and there is when get away from the professional staff. But I appreciate very much your hard work. Mr. President, we've tried for days now to change what the Republicans in the House have tried to do to the American people. In fact, it appears they're going to be able to do it. We have the extension of the Federal Aviation Administration legislation that's being held up. We wanted a temporary extension for the next few weeks. We've already extended more than 20 times. We thought we should do it again, and we've done that. It's been routine until we get some of the big issues worked out. But the Republicans, they wanted to increase the ante a little bit this time. Essential Air Service in Pennsylvania, some of the rural areas. Presiding officers from Pennsylvania. Of course, Nevada has a lot of rural areas. And other states. Even the heavily populated state of New York has Essential Air Service. Essential Air Service was set up a long time ago to allow underpopulated areas to be able to be in touch with the rest of the state. The Republicans have tried to eliminate Essential Air Service, and that's the ransom they're asking now for an extension of the FAA bill. I'm not going to ask consent today. We've asked it many, many times. But I want the record to be spread with how unreasonable it is what the Republicans have done. As a result of their activities, House Republicans, we have 80,000 people who won't be working now. 80,000 people. More than 70,000 construction workers and thousands of people who are employees of the Federal Aviation Administration. For example, in Nevada, we have an air traffic control tower, a new one that needs to be built. It's very, very, it's going to be big and expensive and necessary. The work has stopped. They worked there for less than a month. The work has stopped. The construction work has stopped. I talked to the senator from California, Senator Boxer, today. Palm Springs, they have one that's essentially, it really is badly needed. Work has stopped on that. Construction projects all over America held up at our airports. It's so very, very unreasonable what they've done. I appreciate Kay Bailey Hutchison, Republican senator from Texas, who has worked with Chairman of the committee, Jay Rockefeller, to try to work past this. She agrees with Senator Rockefeller. This is unreasonable that they have done this. Now, Mr. President, what I want to do is read a column that out of the New York Times of July 29th. And he introduces his column by saying the facts of the crisis over the debt ceiling aren't complicated. Republicans have in effect taken America hostage, threatening to undermine the economy and disrupt the essential business government unless they get policy concessions they would never have been able to enact through legislation. Well, that's where we are with the FAA problem. He goes on to say, as I've said, it's not complicated, yet many people in the news media apparently can't bring themselves to acknowledge this simple reality. News reports portray the parties as equally intransigent. Pundits fantasize about some kind of centrist uprising as if the problem was too much partisanship on both sides. Some of us have long complained about the cult of balance, the insistence on portraying both parties as equally wrong and equally at fault on any issue, never mind the facts. I joked long ago that if one party declared the earth was flat, the headlines would read, "Views differ on shape of planet." But would that cult still rule in a situation as stark as the one we now face, in which one party is clearly engaged in blackmail? He went on to say other things, and here's some of the other things he said. The answer, it turns out, is yes. And this is no laughing matter. The code of balance has played an important role in bringing us to the edge of disaster. For when reporting on political disputes always implies that both sides are to blame, there is no penalty for extremism. Voters won't punish you for the outrageous behavior if all they ever hear is that both sides are at fault. Mr. President, I wish the press would report this outrageous conduct on behalf of the House of Representative Republicans. In effect, closing down work for 80,000 people in America because of their trying to eliminate essential air service. The issue is certainly more than that. We know it's a labor issue. We have one airline that is terribly anti-union, and they're the ones behind all this. They're using the essential air service as a guise to get what they want. So I'm not going to ask consent, but I want the American people to know why essential air service is being attacked and why 80,000 people are basically today not going to be able to go to work tomorrow. Mr. President, I now ask unanimous consent that on Tuesday, September 6th at 5 p.m., of course, it's 2011, the Senate proceed to executive session to consider calendar number 109. There will be 30 minutes for debate equally divided in the usual form, that upon the use or yielding back of that time, the Senate proceed to vote with no intervening action or debate on calendar number 109. The motion reconsidered be considered made and laid on the table. There will be no intervening action or debate, that any related statements be printed in the record, and the President of the United States be immediately notified of such action, and then the Senate resume legislative session.
Without objection.
Sorry. I move to proceed to calendar number 87, H.R. 1249.
The clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 87, H.R. 1249, an act to amend Title 35 United States Code to provide for patent reform.
I have a cloture motion at the desk, Mr. President.
The clerk will report the cloture motion.
Cloture motion, we the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close the debate on the motion to proceed to calendar number 87, H.R. 1249, the Leahy-Smith America Invents Act, signed by 17 senators as follows.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that reading of the names be waived.
Without objection.
I now ask unanimous consent that on Tuesday, September 6th, following disposition of the nomination of Bernice Donald and the resumption of the legislative session, the Senate proceed to vote on the motion to vote cloture on the motion to proceed to calendar number 87, H.R. 1249, further that the mandatory quorum under Rule 22 be waived.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the following environment and public works bills on block, calendar number 72, calendar number 117.
Without objection.
It's my understanding that you have granted consent for me to move to those two numbered matters. Is that right, Mr. President?
That's correct.
I ask unanimous consent the bills be read a third time, passed on block. The motion reconsider be laid on the table on block, and then any relevant statements to this matter be printed in the record as if read.
Without objection.
I now ask unanimous consent the Judiciary Committee be discharged from further consideration as Res 104.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 104, designating September 2011 as Campus Fire Safety Month.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, the committee is discharged and the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion reconsider be laid upon the table. There be no intervening action or debate. Any statements relating to this matter be placed in the record as if read.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to S.Res. 254.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 254, designating August 16, 2011 as National Airborne Day.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion reconsider be laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate. Any statements relating to this matter be placed in the record at the appropriate place as if given.
Without objection.
I now ask that we proceed to S.Res. 255.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 255, designating October 8, 2011 as National Chess Day.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion reconsider be laid upon the table. There be no intervening action or debate, and any statements related to this matter appear in the appropriate place as if read.
Without objection.
I now ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to executive session, consider the following nominations. Count number 95, 230, 232, 254, 255, 256, 257, 265, 266, 267, 268, 269, 275, 277, 278, 279, 280, 282, 283, 284, 285, 286, and 288, and calendars numbered 291 through 323. And nominations placed on the Secretary's desk in the Air Force, Army, Foreign Service, Marine Corps, and Navy. That the nominations be confirmed and blocked, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid on the table with no intervening action or debate, and that no motions be in order for any of the nominations, and that any related statements be printed in the record, and President Obama be immediately notified of the President's action.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate consider the following nominations, calendar number 114, 15, 16, and 17.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask that the nomination be confirmed and blocked, the motion reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table. There be no intervening action or debate, and any motions, that there be no further motions ordered to any of the nominations, and any related statements be printed in the record, and the President Obama be notified of the Senate's action.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that the Commerce Committee be discharged from further consideration of PN 741, which is Deborah A.P. Hersman of Virginia to be Chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board for 2 years.
Without objection.
I also ask, Mr. President, the nomination be confirmed, the motion reconsider be considered made and laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate, and that any statements related to this matter be printed in the record, and President Obama be immediately notified of Senate's action, and then the Senate resume legislative session.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that notwithstanding the Senate's recess, committees be authorized to report legislative and executive matters on Tuesday, August 30th from 10 a.m. to 12 noon.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that notwithstanding the upcoming recess or adjournment of the Senate, the President of the Senate, the President pro tempore of the Senate, of the majority, and the minority leaders be authorized to make appointments to commissions, committees, boards, conferences. I didn't read that right. I'll start over. I ask unanimous consent that notwithstanding the upcoming recess or adjournment of the Senate, the President of the Senate, the President pro tempore, and the majority and minority leaders be authorized to make appointments to commissions, committees, boards, conferences, or interparliamentary conferences authorized by law by concurrent action of the two houses or by order of the Senate.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that from Tuesday, August 2nd through Tuesday, September 6th, the Majority Leader and Senator Rockefeller be authorized to sign duly enrolled bills or joint resolutions.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business day at recess and convene pro forma sessions only, with no business conducted in the following dates and times, and following each pro forma session, the Senate recess until the following pro forma session: Friday, August 5th at 10 a.m., Tuesday, August 9th at 11 a.m., Friday, August 12th at 12 p.m., Tuesday, August 16th at 11 a.m., Friday, August 19th at 10 a.m., Tuesday, August 23rd at 2:30 p.m., Friday, August 26th at 11:15 a.m., Tuesday, August 30th at 10 a.m., Friday, September 2nd at 10 a.m., and that the Senate adjourn on Friday, September 2nd until 2 p.m. on Tuesday, September 6th. Following the prayer and the pledge, adjourned proceedings be approved to date. The morning hour be deemed expired. The time for the two leaders be reserved for use later in the day. Further, the following media remarks, the Senate being a pretty morning business, 11 morning business until 5 p.m. with the senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each during that time. And finally, the following morning business, the Senate proceed to executive session under the previous order.
Without objection.
Next roll call votes then will be at about 5:30 on Tuesday, September 6th. The first vote will be on confirmation of Bernice Donald to be a United States Circuit Judge for the Sixth Circuit. And the second vote will be on cloture on the motion to proceed to H.R. 1249, the Patent Reform Bill. So, Mr. President, if there's nothing further to be brought for the Senate, I ask that we recess under the previous order.
Senate stands adjourned. Senate stands in recess. till Friday, August 5th at 10 a.m.
Today, the Senate, by a vote of 74 to 26, passed a measure